the business becomes more complex, and therefore, your wins become bigger and your losses become more profound as well when they happen.
Put that fear of failure to the side, fail, start to make mistakes. That's when they quit. And it's actually when they should be doubling down and learning from it and continuing on.
It goes back to your why.
Yeah.
So why did you start this? Why are you doing it? A lot of those things are not just financially based, but the other part, there's something inside that's sort of burning you up, and you see this is the best way to do it.
Time to get fired up. Yeah, I'm getting fired up.
Your thoughts can become plans, plans can become actions, and actions become a reality. We share powerful stories and simple steps to fast track your business and personal growth. Are you ready to make it happen? Let's get fired up. Welcome back to the Fired Up podcast. Today we have an incredible guest joining us, Bill Gremos, a visionary entrepreneur and business leader with an impressive track record in retail, consulting and innovation. Bill's journey began at Sydney's Paddy's markets in the early 80s, where he built the foundation for what would become Deco Rug, a market-leading retail group with over 30 locations. Under his leadership, Deco Rug revolutionised the floor-covering retail sector, pioneering immersive store experiences, launching a successful franchise model, and introducing game-changing product innovations. His expertise spans across retail. He's led ventures in extreme jet boating, professional motorsports, and launched Australia's first digital homewares supercentre. And now, as the founder of Retail Extra Advisory, he's dedicated to helping businesses scale, succeed, and stay ahead of the game. With decades of experience and a deep understanding of strategy, leadership, and innovation, Bill has a wealth of insights to share. Get ready for an inspiring conversation filled with valuable lessons from one of Australia's most accomplished business minds. Bill, welcome to the show. So, Bill, I'm keen to just talk about a bit of your history and how this whole entrepreneurial journey that you've been on took shape. Can you give us a bit of background on where it all began, from where it kind of went from having a job to going and do your own thing?
Yeah, I suppose it really began when I was 13 years old, or thereabouts, 13, 14 years old, and I started working for a gentleman by the name of Frank at the weekend markets. With the encouragement of my mother, so I can go and get some worldly experience, so to speak.
Yeah.
And prior to that, I grew up at the back of a shop. My parents had fast food and convenience store businesses, and so we're always in that sort of business environment. But anyway, I started working at the markets, and I was I just couldn't believe, turning up there at 5:30 in the morning on a Saturday or a Sunday, and just the dynamic of it, the energy, the hustle of the markets and all that, and you soon get used to it. But it was a real eye opener for me even at that young age. And then I did that for a few years, and I eventually wanted to do it by myself. So I ended up becoming a storeholder at the age of just prior to my 18th birthday. So that's where that sort of journey started, being exposed to business people and what have you, and a trader sort of environment.
Yeah.
And then I launched a business at the markets, and that was basically the start of what was to become Deco Rug 10 years later. So I've always been in that sort of business environment.
So what was the stall at the markets? What were you selling?
Oh, I was selling rugs, so area rugs, and I got into that by sheer accident, not through choice.
Yeah.
Because I actually went to my father one time and I said, Dad, I'm sick of working at the markets for Frank for X amount of dollars a day and what have you. I can do it by myself. He was working as a salesman at a Manchester business. And I said to him, some of your suppliers, they must be willing to give us some consignment stock or do something. And I can pick up on Friday, go to the markets on the weekend, and then go back on Monday and settle up. So he came back to me with a couple of options. One of them was a business that was importing and distributing wholesaling rugs, and there was only very, very limited sort of lines back then. It was basically two different types, and there was also portable phones. So the handheld sort of what were they, wireless phones at the time? And we're talking about sort of the mid '80s, early '80s.
Yeah.
And I was keen to get into the phones, actually. So, it's one of those sliding doors sort of moments. But he said to me that the technology wasn't great. They weren't working. People kept returning them. So that put me off the phones, and I ended up getting into the rug business. So I opened a rug stall.
Yeah, right. So where were you importing the rugs from?
We were buying them from a wholesaler who was bringing them in from Brazil, and I still remember the name. They were called Deslor. There was basically 4 designs in 4 different colours. So it was only the start of what we would call affordable area rugs, as opposed to your works of art, the Persian ones and all that sort of thing that people were accustomed to.
Yeah.
And the other product line that he had was Flocati rugs that came from Greece. They were imported from Greece. They were the wool shaggy ones.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I started with, just two product lines.
Yeah, right. So you've got the import contacts. You're importing the rugs from these 2 areas to take to the markets, and I'm guessing markets early starts.
Very early, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
So,
and then it's all
not
about
much fun. Not much fun after a night out, I tell you.
No, I can imagine. So, and then you're like, you got people coming in, they're asking questions. Now you're in the sales game, right? Because it's all about what's the benefit, what's the feature. So, what are some of those learnings that you learnt on around, I guess, that sales mentality, customer relationships? Because I know that this is really what has taken shape along your career as it's grown, and now helping other people with sales, tools and systems and that sort of thing. But what were some of those like key learnings as you were at that early stage of selling rugs to customers coming into the markets? Like, what did you really learn from that period?
I suppose you have to tune into and understand customer concerns when they want to make a buying decision, right? You have to understand their why. So we were selling rugs. That was the physical product. But it took me a little while, but I soon learned that it wasn't the rugs. I was selling a home fashion decor item that they were going to put on display in their home, typically in their lounge and living areas. And these were house proud customers who wanted to beautify their home. And once we tuned into that dynamic, that sort of element, we became very successful at sales. Customer engagement and at sales execution. Prior to that, you think you're dealing in a product and you're sort of at arm's length mentally from why the customer's buying it, what they hope to achieve from it, and what have you. And that doesn't serve you very well at all if you're in sales. You have to really understand the business that you're in, the real business that you're in, and ultimately it's the customer, it's the people business, and by extension, what that purchase is going to do for them and why they're buying it.
Yeah. Before we get into the stores, because obviously it went from the market to a store to multiple stores. When you're in the market situation, you've just spoken about the sales part, which is, having that customer interaction. Was there any marketing at that point, or were you just relying on foot traffic, or were you doing any marketing to kind of generate interest for people to come and see you there?
No, there was no marketing whatsoever. It was the foot traffic and it was the environment that you're in. So you're in the market. There are tens of thousands of people coming through every weekend.
Yeah.
You've only got a very small window between typically 8 in the morning after you've set up until 5 o'clock in the afternoon when the vans start rolling in so they can pack up to make hay. So you need to be on your game for sure. But you're relying purely on foot traffic. And also, if you're doing a good enough job, you're relying on referrals. So customers send their friends to you that next week and the next month and what have you. And that was the basis of it.
Yeah, makes sense.
So at the markets, there's nothing else. We did, though, take a big leap at one point and did a really big marketing push that was big TV exposure and everything else, and used the markets as a location, but that was just a one-off.
A one-off. So some of the clients that I deal with, or conversations I've had doing speaking events and things, it's always, particularly in that startup phase, and when you've got a product, the whole cash flow thing comes up, right? Because, and particularly, you'd be in the same position. You got to buy all the stock, so you're holding a stock volume, which has got a bunch of cash associated with it, and then you've got to sell it and get the profit. So, how did you kind of fund this in terms of having the stock holding and paying for that before you sold it?
Initially, we worked on consignment stock from suppliers that we had good relationships with, and we built those relationships over time.
Yeah.
And then you're obviously investing in stock through the profit, reinvesting the profits from your business, making sure you manage your cash flow appropriately and what have you.
Yeah.
And what you're saying there, Ben, becomes even more of a stretch when you start years later developing your own product and importing product direct in massive numbers. So you're being a lot more speculative then, because you're forward planning your sales and making sure you've got enough stock. So, and the right stock, obviously, at the right time. So that becomes a little bit more complex. And ideally, you're doing that through your business, but you're also typically using financiers like bankers and what have you, and you're using credit to some extent.
Got it. All right.
As you grow, obviously.
As you grow, yeah, cool. So let's move into the store phase now. So after the success of the markets, that enabled to go and get retail or shop front, and then that led into multiple sites, and that's a big transition from going minimal stock holdings, maybe one staff member, to multiple staff members. You've got banking, you've got suppliers, you've got retail elements. The whole thing must have changed quite significantly. So talk us around that growth process and what the key learnings were there. And also, if you've got mistakes, love talking about mistakes, because usually that's what
I've got plenty.
Usually that's what shapes people's
I've got plenty, mate. After all these years, I've got
yeah.
So,
all right.
Look, what we did is I started working the markets, as we've already covered, and within a few months after I sort of found my feet a little bit, my father left his job and came and joined me because he could see I was actually making more money than he was at that time. Just that the business started to do all right, and so we then duplicated that into other markets as well. And eventually we opened a store, a temporary store, simply because the products that we were dealing in, especially the big ticket, the more expensive lines, customers were a little bit hesitant, especially if they were seeing you first time, because they didn't know if you were going to be there again next weekend. Because the markets, start working on a Saturday morning, for arguments. For example, at 8 o'clock, everybody's disappeared at 5, right? They don't know if you're going to be back there next week if something should happen. So we opened a store that was called Floor Decor, and then we opened a couple of others. So over the next few years, we had quite a number of market stall operations, and we had some staff as well, and we had probably 3 or 4 stores, Floor Decor stores, at any given time, typically around 3 or something like that. And that saw us through the next sort of 10 years, and then we launched Deco Rug in 1993. So Deco Rug became an overnight success 10 years in the making, right?
Yeah.
As an evolution of what we learned over those 10 years and what have you. So in terms of the challenges with all of that is that you grow in stages. You don't just wake up one day and you go from zero to hero. You grow in stages. You make a lot of mistakes. You take your learnings. There's no doubt about that. The typical mistakes we made and I made were opening a store that didn't work. It was in the wrong location. And in the early days, that was sort of about it. We were very small, not very exposed. So, you can band-aid those problems and just take your learnings from them. But as you grow over the years and you get into Deco Rug, and I'm sure we'll talk about Deco Rug a little later, but the business becomes more complex, and therefore, your wins become bigger and your losses become more profound as well when they happen. So, so there's a lot of learnings in all of that. There's a lot of challenges in growing, but you grow slowly.
Yeah. And now, look, I think a lot of people, there's 2 parts. So the first one is the fear of failure. So not wanting to do things because they're worried it's not going to work out, which is a natural state and fair enough.
Sure.
Then for those that do take the leap and actually put that fear of failure to the side and actually go through the process and then start to fail, start to make mistakes, start to stumble on themselves, that's when they quit. And it's actually when they should be doubling down and learning from it and continuing on. So what does it take? Like, how did you actually work through those challenges and failures? Like, what kept you doing it instead of giving up?
Mate, I think, it goes back to your why.
Yeah.
So why did you start this? Why are you doing it? What do you have to achieve from it? And a lot of those things are not just financially based, right? That's one part of your goal framework. But the other part, there's something inside that's sort of burning you up, and each you have to scratch, and you see this is the best way to do it. And as entrepreneurs, I think it's in your DNA to some extent, and you see an opportunity and you want to go after it. And I think a lot of people with that sort of makeup don't look at the problem, or the fear, the failure aspect of it. It's not at the top of their list, right? It's this is going to work, and this will be great, and people are going to love it, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and all the things you're going to achieve from it. But the failure aspect is not something that just happens at the start. Like you're concerned around it, like if it's going to work, if it's not, what happens if it doesn't, what have you.
Yeah.
It happens at every decision that you take, whether you're sourcing new product, whether you're developing new product, whether you're taking out a new long-term lease on a new shopping center, like I did many times. You don't know if these things are going to fire or what they're going to do, right? So at every, a new employee getting a key staff member on board, paying them big dollars, putting them in an important leadership role, for example, that's a risk. So you make the best decisions. One thing I've always said, right, and even to my people, was at some point you have all the information you need to make a decision, and you have to make the best decision you know how, based on what you know now. That's it, and then we move.
Mm.
And if you wait until you get more and more information, you're actually never going to come out of the blocks ever. So if you're totally adverse to risk and fear, and you fear of failure, maybe business isn't sort of the right environment for you. You have to have an element of being able to back yourself, and the approach, I suppose, is that no matter what it is, right, we're going to keep going and we're going to find a way. And there's always a way. Sometimes, we stress about things. Normally, we stress about them because we don't know the answer to something, haven't figured it out yet, or we actually know the answer and we don't like it very much, right?
Yeah, I like that.
and you wish you had sort of different options, right? But it comes down to, and I think the difference is deciding and moving, not standing still. So, was I worried about things not working? Yeah, all the time at various stages.
Yeah.
Did I stop that from letting me, from have a go? Absolutely not, right? You just have to you press on, and it changes a little bit when you scale and when you've got a large network of stores and staff and everything else. That changes a little bit, but in the beginning, it's relative to your size and the risks. It's all relative. So, for example, if I went to the markets and I spent 6 months at the markets and made zip, right? I'll learn something from that. You always learn something from failure. It's never a net zero game, right? There's always something you take from it. So have a go. You'll learn. Maybe you completely change product categories. Maybe you change industries. Maybe you change sectors. But your learning stay with you. And so even when you're failing, you've invested in yourself. That's the way I see it. But you have a go. You have a red hot go at everything.
Yeah.
And you don't just sit there and contemplate it forever. So
yeah,
sorry, I lost track of your question.
No, you answered it completely. I mean,
it
was trying to drive through the point of like, I think people need to find their why, like you said, and that gives you the courage and the reasoning to push forward and to evolve and to grow and everything else. Bigger business, bigger problems. More staff, more problems.
Yeah,
more money.
And different. Yeah,
and a different type of problem, right?
See, it is, Ben, because when you're small and you're starting out, you're a founder. That's word of the day these days. Everybody's a founder and all that sort of thing, and you're an entrepreneur, and it's another fashionable term that we throw around to everybody who's got a website these days, right? It's all well and that's what you are, right? You're having a go. You're an entrepreneur, as the word sort of says, right? Describes. But as your business scales and grows, you're not an entrepreneur anymore, and you can't be thinking like one. You're now a business person. You're an executive. You're a director with director responsibilities. There's a very significant sort of change in those two roles. You can't be seat of your pants stuff, running a business that you think that you do everything in, and respond like that. The larger the ship, the longer it needs time and space to turn, right?
Yeah.
So that dynamic changes quite significantly. You're an entrepreneur when you start, but you don't stay one. You need to start making measured decisions, having a plan for your business, having people on board. You can only lead them if they're willing to follow. So they need to know where you're going, right, and why. So those sort of things change quite significantly. So your risk factors change as well with that.
So, do you mind talking about like what was your why? Like, why were you doing this at all?
To go into business to begin with,
Yeah.
my why was because I wanted to build something that my parents were proud of. My parents immigrated to Australia from Greece in the mid-'60s, and I watched them bust their backside, day in, day out, living at the back of and above a fast food business and convenience store. And I didn't want the sacrifices they made for me and my three siblings to be in vain, right? Or to look back and go, what was that all for? So I wanted to build legacy, and I wanted to build something that my parents were proud of, and not ashamed to say so, right? I wanted to make a lot of money. I was driven to succeed, and have and be financially well off.
Right.
So they were the two drivers. But when you bolt the business onto that, right? So what's the business's why, and how does that relate to me? I realized that through this through this vehicle, that I'm using, I'll achieve my things if I help customers achieve theirs. So why are they here? What do they happen to achieve? And the rest of it, basically, it's all encompassing. So you'll get what you want if you give customers what they want and understand where everybody's driven from.
Right.
But that was my way, essentially.
So let's talk about then, the growth and scale of this thing, because after shop number one, shop number two, things went pretty quickly and grew quite significantly. So talk us through that phase.
So with Deco Rug, we launched that in 1993, and like I said, it was a overnight success, 10 years in the making. From the time that we launched it, taking the lessons that we'd already known, there was systems and structure in place from day one. So the way the stores were merchandised, the way they were laid out, the operating systems and everything, and it was geared towards being a business that can scale, being stores that can replicate. And I wanted a customer who comes into our store, for example, one of our first stores was in Burwood in Sydney, and then goes to the Caringbah store, which was in the southern suburbs in Sydney, that they would get the same experience, and they know the store that they're walking into without having to look at the brand, right? They knew that they're one and the same. So that duplication, that replication thing was very, very important. And so, it was, and the other thing with the systems and the structure and all that was that one of the objectives and one of the goals was to get it to a point where we can franchise to grow. And the reason why we wanted the franchise to grow was because the passion that an owner operator brings would help us maintain our standards as we scaled and opened more stores. So I knew that at some point it would be a challenge to have 10, 20, 30 stores and have uniform standards to where we wanted them right across the board.
Yeah.
So that's what we did there. So we launched Deco Rug, like I said, in '93. We opened a few stores. We introduced flooring, pre-finished engineered flooring, which was very new at the time in the late 90s, 98, 99. And that came about from a failed marketing exercise, actually. There's a sort of good story in that one. But we did that very well. We got fully on board with it. We gave it mass market appeal. And eventually we diversified even further into wall-to-wall carpet and window furnishings. So these days, in that retail sector, if you look at a typical rug store, they've got flooring, they've got carpet, they've got window furnishings, and that all was on the back of what Deco Rug did, and we sort of pioneered that and changed that sort of landscape a little bit.
So, because it is a competitive space now, and it was back then as well, right? Like it's So, how would you describe how you guys were different? Like, what set you apart? What gave you the success in a saturated space?
Yeah, it's the store experience, the way the stores were laid out, and the way we presented, and the customer experience. That were the two things that people that our competition used to look at us and just couldn't understand exactly what we're doing. There was a very, very effective way that we laid out the stores where when customers came into a Deco Rug store, they were comfortable to shop and browse, and the And the approach was never a hard sell. It was always a consultative sort of interaction. Very effective, mind you, very effective. But we took a customer on a journey with the objective of helping them, buy something fashionable for their home, and fulfill their needs that way. So that was very, very important. The other thing that worked very well for Decorug in the day was the brand presence and the brand equity that we built. So that was obviously through marketing and various other things that we did. But the whole experience was what really set it apart, including the physical one.
Yeah, with the marketing. So how did you go about that? What platforms did you use? What worked the best in terms of cut through and getting return on investment on that marketing dollar?
Well, back in the day, there was no, social media was not a thing, right?
Yeah.
So we did all sorts of things, including radio, and that was a very sort of strategic approach to how we bought radio and used radio. We were on TV with TV commercials, and always, really high quality media that we put out there in terms of commercials and the way they were shot, and newspaper, media press, and catalogs. That were the most effective sort of methods, all combined, and we did that very, very regularly. And we always presented Decorug, the brand itself, in a manner where customers knew exactly who we were and what we're about. And we also got involved in motorsport, which is a strange one for most people from the outset. They just look at it and go, motorsport, why? I mean, your market was typically a female housebred consumer, right? Why would you get into motorsport? That's a blokey thing, isn't it? And yes, it is. But what it did is that it says something about what your brand is. So you put your you put your brand on a national motorsport category like the V8 supercars, and you had a high profile there as well, and it says a lot about what your brand does. And we, on the back of that, could do events for customers where we would invite them and give them hot laps, and give them a corporate experience that would be unforgettable for them and their kids.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that we didn't just deal in rugs. We're very big in flooring and in carpet, and these purchases take the household to make a decision on. So while typically somebody might instigate that buying decision and say, we need new carpet or we need new flooring, the household's making that decision. So it's about building trust and equity in your brand. So we did the TV, the radio, the catalogs, and everything else, as well as motorsport. That were the big drivers. And more recently, then you get into socials and things like that.
So then let's move forward from that. So then you got to the point, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you sold the business.
Yeah.
Then they wanted you to come back in as in a CEO advisory role. Is that
the business? Look, the business went through some difficulties. We got sort of caught out with changing direction with regard to buying back the franchisees and having more control. And we had at the time another retail chain called Rug City, which was going okay, but it was basically diluting things for us. And it was just, we wanted to get really big on the flooring and on the window furnishing side. So I just wanted to narrow the focus down and tidy things up a little bit. And while we were doing all that, we had the GFC hit, which kicked almost everybody sideways for a little bit.
Right.
So we had our challenges, and I was pretty much burnt out, and decided that once we got over the hump, we would sell the business, and that's what we did. And we sold it to some really good guys who were in the wholesale, import wholesale distribution business, and they were very big in that. I think one of Australia's largest at the time, and still are. And they wanted to diversify and get into retail, which I thought was a pretty clever move on their part. So the most well-known retail chain is up for sale, and they're a strong retailer, so a strong wholesaler, so that the fit was an obvious one.
Yeah.
So I sold it on the premise that I would walk away. There was no nothing tying me back in anything. There was no obligation for me to go back or anything like that. So I did go away, took the family overseas for a while, came back, caught up with the guys, and then looked at a couple of challenges that they were having, and they didn't probably expect certain things from a multi-brand, multi-channel, multi-channel retailer. And I think one of the strategies largest at the time, and still are, store operation of Decker Rug size. So I jumped back in tentatively at first to help and mentor and deal with a few things, and bit on the marketing, staff training, things like that. Then dealt with a few leasing issues and what have you. And then my involvement grew, which was not the intention. And at some point I said, we've set up really, really well. We're on a solid footing here. Things are firing. We'd grown the business quite significantly. And while I was still young enough and sort of had the energy to go and do something else, I wanted to go off and do something else. So that's what eventuated.
Right.
But I'm very proud of what we achieved there. And, Decker Rug is a great business, and the guys there that are doing a great job. So.
Yeah. So that's a good point. So after all of that was done and dusted, and then you're like, right, time for the next thing. Where did you move to next? What did you start next, and why did you do that?
Believe it or not, the digital space.
Right.
So that was a bit of a shift, being the old dinosaur bricks and mortar guy that I was. What we did is we launched a digital homemaker shopping centre. It was it is exclusively for bricks and mortar retailers, so retailers that have a physical store presence. Mm-hmm. And obviously that was the aim for me, because that was something that was dear to me, right? And that, while you're a bricks and mortar retailer and you're seeing the evolution of the digital shopping sort of experience and everything else, and that they're taking money off the table. So the digital only, online only businesses, they're taking money off the table. In the meantime, you've got staff, wages, rent, warehouses, and the whole bit, right?
Yeah.
And it's obviously becoming common. It's commonplace now, rather. But early on, it was a real challenge about how do I do retail without compromising my bricks and mortar, and how do I keep doing my bricks and mortar without doing the digital side, and getting that mix right was, believe it or not, a bit of a challenge for the most part. Everybody's got it pretty much right now, but I saw that one of the differences is that a multi-category, let's look at the home furnishings sort of sector. Mm-hmm. Multi-category marketplaces and multi-category online only retailers have such a broad product category base in which to attract and keep customers engaged that a individual specialty retailer can't go up against them, right? So you look at, for example, a bedding retailer, right? A bedding retailer sells beds and all the accessories around that. So if you're in the market for beds, you'll go into a search engine, type in beds, bedroom, whatever you're going to type in, and you'll see all the retailers in that space, right? But you won't see any other retailer associated with that. When you go into a physical store, physical homemaker centre, though, you might go there to see the bedding retailers, but you're going to pop into the barbecue place, you're going to pop into the floor covering place, you're going to pop into the.
Right, yeah.
Right, so that's why they're all there, because they create critical mass. So the digital-only retailers and the marketplaces have created digital mass. One location, huge warehouse, quick distribution, right? But the specialty retailers are left on their own. So you have to be in the market for them to get in front of you. So Homemaker Central, which is the digital shopping centre, Homemaker Central is designed to bring together bricks and mortar retailers and only bricks and mortar retailers, create that critical mass, provide one checkout point, so you can shop from any retailer you like and get one checkout point, earn rewards points, and have the benefit of coupons and all sorts of other bits and pieces that we sort of put into it. So that's what we went and put together with Homemaker Central. We did a soft launch and did it live and that went really well to begin with, and we wanted to scale it quickly. So we were trying to raise capital and talk to VCs about doing all that. So at the moment we've basically just taken it offline again to build in some of these customer engagement initiatives that we want to introduce, and hopefully we can raise the capital that we need so we can scale it and give bricks and mortar retailers a real collective muscle and have a decent fight in the marketplace in that digital space. Huh?
Right. So let me just relay this back to you, see if I understand it correctly. So the Homemaker Central is a digital online shopping precinct, which has got the combination of going, hey, you looked at barbecues, why don't you look at pillows? You looked at pillows, why don't you look at rugs? And it's bringing all of those retailer concepts together so I can shop in one place and check out in one place from multiple providers.
From multiple retailers that have a physical store presence and their own categories. That's right. So collectively, then you've got a very broad base of categories, of product categories.
Got it.
Everything you do for the home.
So then, how do you guys make money from that? You're selling like advertising space back to those people?
No. We our income stream comes from commissions, like a percentage of sales. Essentially, that's the key one. That's the absolute main.
That's how it works.
Income stream.
This is I'm keen for your thoughts on this because, you mentioned it before, but it wasn't even, 10 years ago, right? People were pretty reluctant to put their credit card online. Shopping online wasn't so much. Getting groceries delivered to your home wasn't there. Uber Eats wasn't there. Like, this stuff is all happening very rapidly. And just from my personal experience and opinion, if I can avoid going to the shops, I will. The drive, the parking, the hassle, the people, not even only to that aspect, but I have just personally seen the whole retail experience erode over the years, where the person in the store doesn't know where anything is, don't know what they're talking about.
That's a different issue altogether, right?
Yeah.
So the physical retail is never going to go away, because no chance, right? Because as much as there is a pain threshold, right? So, for example, if I go and see let's say I'm buying a shirt, right? I might know what my size is, and I want a slim fit, and my size is 41, and I like the style, and depending on who's selling it, whether there's a trust factor there, and there is, I'm good to go, right?
Mm-hmm.
$100, $200, whatever the shirt's going to cost. The bigger that ticket item gets, though, the more you'll want to touch it, feel it, smell it, and see it, right? Because what it fundamentally does is it takes away a certain risk element from it. So you might end up buying it online anyway, but you'll want to see it and touch it to begin with as well.
Yeah.
So the issue that we have, though, Ben, is that and you're right, you do go into retail stores and people don't know if they're shop assistants or salespeople. So that's essentially it. It sounds funny when you say it, and I do this at trainings and everything else as well, right? If your business relies on salespeople, don't employ shop assistants.
Yeah.
You're going to get into trouble, right?
Yeah.
Because a shop assistant is for yes, please businesses, right? The buying decision is not reliant or affected by the salesperson, by the person standing there, right? The staff. The customer doesn't need you to make a decision. They just need you to process. That's a shop assistant. Fill the shelves, do the basics. But on the other side of it, a salesperson needs to understand, interact, engage, and obviously get you to a point where it makes more sense to make a purchase than it does not to. And through that process, that sales progress path, you'll get to a point where you actually want to do business from this person because they've been attentive, they've showed care and attention, and you actually want to reward them. So if the deal makes sense, if the product does what it's supposed to do, you've built up trust, you've got rapport, you'll want to do business with that person because they've added value. And that's what's not happening these days. So you walk into a store and you get ignored. They're too busy doing other things other than looking after their customers. And that's where, and hence why, Retail Extra, which is my retail specialty advisory business, what we focus on, because that's where retailers today in physical stores, bricks and mortar retailers, are leaving so much money on the table, it's a crying shame. It's the sales engagement, it's the customer engagement and sales execution. That's the biggest problem. They don't need to go and spend more money on marketing. They don't need to go and spend more money on, or reduce their profit margin by discounting unnecessarily and heavily. They need to actually make the customer's day. The one that walks in there, right? That's the most important thing in your business. And unfortunately, we're not on top of it.
If you've enjoyed this episode, then subscribe on YouTube or follow our podcast on your favorite platform. We drop a new episode every week. You'll be doing us a massive favor. If you know someone that would benefit from listening to this, then share it with them. You'll be doing them a massive favor. And if you want the tips, tools, and resources to support you on this journey, then join our exclusive Facebook community and follow our socials. You'll be doing yourself a massive favor.